Very good morning. Today we will be going on with the periodontal surgery, the continuation of it, where we'll be dealing with osseous resective surgery. So from this class, we would want you to know how to classify osseous surgery, explain the various terminologies used in resective surgery, list 4 steps in osseous resective surgery, describe the indications and outcomes of resective osseous surgery, and give examples for the modifications in resective osseous surgery. So coming on to the contents, so this particular class consists of an introduction, definition. We will discuss about the normal alveolar bone morphology and about the bone defects, terminology and rationale, indications and contraindications for resective osseous surgery, examination and treatment plan, factors for case and technique selection. So what type of cases would be appropriate for osseous resective surgery, the technique as such, and specific osseous reshaping situations, and then we'll finish it with a conclusion. So to start with, the damage resulting from periodontal disease manifests in variable destruction of the tooth supporting bone. So bone deformities could be either horizontal deformities, which is a relative thickness of the marginal alveolar bone along with the vertical defects. So these both leaves the alveolar bone with countless combinations of bony shapes. So osseous recontouring has to be done so as to provide a more physiological bone pattern. So by definition, osseous resective surgery is a procedure or process by which changes in the alveolar bone can be accomplished to get rid of its deformities induced by the periodontal disease process or other related factors such as exostosis or tooth prior eruption. Periodontal surgery, which deals with the modification of the bony support of the teeth, is known as resective osseous surgery. This was first given by or done by Dr. Saul Schulerger. So he was termed as a father of resective osseous surgery, and we also do have an instrument based on his name. This total elimination of pocket could be done only with the removal of the bony component of the pocket. So this was his thought about resective osseous surgery, and he went about with doing the surgery. He reshaped the bone to get a physiologic form, thereby reducing the pocket wall or reducing the pocket depth. So now coming on to the normal alveolar morphology. So as you all know, and as you all have read in Omar as well as Perio, the normally interproximal bone would be at a more coronal position when compared to the labial or the lingual bone. So you can see very well that this part is little higher than the radicular bone. So it's otherwise called as the radicular bone. This is your interproximal bone, a little higher than your radicular bone. Form of the interdental bone is just a function of the tooth form and the embrasure width. So which means that if there is a space between two teeth, this interdental bone could have a different shape, or if there is a crowding between two teeth, the interdental bone could have a more narrower shape. So the portion of the bony margin mimics the contours of the cemento enamel junction. So as told already that whenever in case of your radicular bone, this portion of the bone will mimic your CEJ, which is there lying above it. So to tell more about the different forms of bone, we would have already learned this in the bone patterns and laws of bone destruction. You would have read it in that chapter about the architecture of bone. So a positive or a normal architecture in one is one in which the interdental bone is found coronal to the radicular bone. A flat architecture bone is one in which the interdental bone is parallel or it is at the same level to that of the interradicular to that of the radicular bone. Negative or a reverse architecture where the interproximal bone is a little apical to the radicular bone on the both the sides. So you can see that is little dipped inside. Ideally, the bone is consistently more coronal on the interproximal surfaces than on the facial or lingual surfaces. So we somehow try to maintain this particular or the positive architecture after these surgical procedures when we do such resective osseous surgeries, that is interdental bone being a little coronal to the radicular bone. So what are the defects which by which we can go on with these treatments? We can go on with resective osseous surgeries in cases such as osseous craters where there is a two-wall defect. So I can go on with certain osseous recontouring so that I get a normal architecture. Or you can go on with exostosis cases. So here I have a bone which has been push outside by means of exostosis. So here I can go in for vertical grooving followed by your resective osseous procedures, or if there is a one wall defect like this, I can go in for contouring this area, so thereby giving patient a good form to control the plaque by himself. Or any furcation involvement, like for example the marginal bone has been enlarged here, and resulting in furcation involvement, there is a bone loss also there. So this can be made a little regularized like this, and easy for the patient to maintain the furcation area. So bone defects are of two types. It could be either horizontal, or it could be a vertical or an angular bone defects. So horizontal bone defects, as you all know, is one in which the bone is found perpendicular to the long axis of the tooth, and vertical bone defect is one which is at an angle to the long axis of the teeth, and the most apical part is the most apical part is little away from the coronal portion of the alveolar crust. So this is your angular bone, a slightly troughed out effect. So vertical or angular defects can be of three types. That is a one wall defects where there is only one wall remaining, or two wall defects where there are two walls remaining. Here you have the distal as well as the mesial wall, or a three wall defects where you have all the three walls remaining, but there will be a trough which is there inside. So accordingly you do have your procedure which you have to select. Generally, if it is for the resective osseous surgery, you go in for resective therapies in case of one wall defect, resective or regenerative procedure for case of two wall defects, a regenerative procedure in case of a three wall defect. So coming on to the types of osseous surgery, there are two types of osseous surgery, either subtractive or additive. Subtractive osseous surgery is nothing but you're going to remove a component of your bone. So you can see an image here wherein you have a one wall defect here. So this patient has a pocket on this particular teeth, thereby there is more amount of if the pocket gets deeper, then there's going to be more amount of bone loss here. So what we do is that we take off this wall of the bone, and then we make it flat so that the gingiva falls back to it, and the patient is able to maintain himself. So this is kind of a subtractive type of osseous surgery. Whereas there is another type called as the additive type of osseous surgery, wherein I have a bony defect here. So in this area, instead of taking or removing out this wall, I find that this is a little blurred. Can you see that the image is a little blurred here? So I find that there should be two walls here. So I go in for a regenerative procedure wherein I can place my bone grafts in this area, and then I suture it back. So this is an additive procedure, that is restoring bone to its original level is an additive procedure, whereas restoring pre-existing alveolar bone to the present at the time of the surgery or slightly apical to it is a subtractive procedure. Subtractive procedure is of two types. It could be either an osteoplasty where you are just reshaping the bone, or it's an osteectomy where you're cutting away the bone. Whereas additive is just regenerative where you are adding some bone graft materials. Next, coming on to the rationale. So the main rationale behind this is that there could be discrepancies in the bone or the gingival margin level. So these are the discrepancies which are found in the bone level or in the bone level in the gingival margin level. This could lead to pocket formation. So what we do is that we contour this area in such a way, so the contouring is done in such a way that you get a shallow sulcus, and thereby you allow the patient to maintain this area. So this irregular surface is contoured to a very good surface, and the gingiva lays down behind that, and this is allowed by the patient to maintain. In other words, the main rationale is to reshape the marginal bone to resemble that of the alveolar process undamaged by the periodontal diseases, to correct the discrepancies in the level and shapes of bone, surgical elimination of pocket with resultant minimal probing depths, or thereby resulting in proper pocket plaque control and maintenance by the patient. So coming on to the terminologies, so there are two broad terminologies when we are talking about osseous resective surgeries. One is osteoplasty. So the term plasty itself means that there is going to be some reshaping. So osteoplasty in the sense there is reshaping of the alveolar process to achieve a more physiological form without removal of the bone. The term osteotomy, tuctomy means there is going to be removal of some component. So osteotomy, in the sense we are going to remove or excise bone or portion of a tooth supporting bone. So that is your osteotomy. So here you could see that we generally reshape with the help of burrs, and again here the bone is removed with the help of burrs. So osseous resective surgery is a combination of both these procedures to re-establish the marginal bone morphology around the teeth to resemble the normal bone with a positive architecture but at a more apical position. So coming on to its indication, the main indications for resective osseous surgery would include early to moderate bone loss 2 to 3 mm. Mainly it could be either a one wall or a two wall defects or osseous craters. So these are the main indications. Apart from this, any existence of non-supporting bone that hinders the flap adaptation, you can do resective osseous surgery so that you remove this non-supporting bone. Recontour the bone that forms the outer wall of the pocket. Shallow intrabony defects with sufficient periodontal support, incipient furcation involvements, residual osseous defect after regenerative therapy, irregularity of bone morphology related to hemisection or root amputation, clinical crown lengthening for restorative or prosthetic treatment, deep caries of fracture extending subgingivally or to the alveolar bone. So here you can see a case where there is a sufficient amount of, there's a pocket present. So when reflected, you could see that the depth of the pocket which is present. So what we do is that, and you could see some amount of bony irregularity. So bone is being contoured accordingly and the flap is being replaced back. So you can see that there is a space here. So this space is to be maintained by the patient later. So where is it indicated? Osteoplasties and osteotomy. Osteoplasty is generally indicated in cases where there is buccal or lingual bony ledges with tori or intrabony defects associated with tilted molars, shallow buccal or lingual intrabony defects, flat interproximal areas, elimination of deep interproximal defects to achieve physiological contours, incipient furcation involvement, and for the improvement of the alveolar contours for flap adaptation. Whereas osteotomy is mainly done for the elimination of interdental craters, intrabony pockets not amenable to reattachment procedures, horizontal alveolar bone loss with irregular marginal bone height, moderate and advanced furcation involvement. So for the osteotomy procedures, we would do it generally for the elimination of interdental craters, intrabony pockets not amenable to reattachment procedures, horizontal alveolar bone loss with irregular marginal bone height, moderate and advanced furcation involvement. So what are the contraindications for the procedures? Deep interosseous craters, 3-wall osseous defects, moderate to deep circumferential defects. If the furcation involvement will occur in future, if you are going to do resective osseous treatment, we will not do in such cases. Aesthetics resulting in attachment loss. So for those cases, we will not be doing extended tooth mobility. Supposing if it is grade 2 mobility and with the resective osseous surgery, it is going to become grade 3, then we will not be doing it. If there is a risk of root caries, then we don't do it. Uncontrolled root hypersensitivity and general contraindications for surgery, resective osseous surgery is not done. So basically the endpoints which you have take home points are that osseous resective surgery is done in cases with minimal probing depths, in where the gingival tissue morphology that enhances the good self-performed oral hygiene and periodontal health is done. So these are the endpoints that you should take home. Osteoplasty is basically the enhancement of the tissue placement and adaptation at the time of suturing. So osteoplasty generally helps it, and it is also used along with a modified Bidman flap or apically positioned flap. Whereas osteotomy, it is generally used for the elimination of an intrabony pocket used with an apically positioned flap. So here you can see a case wherein you have a defect of around 6 mm, and when opened you could see irregular bony contours, and therefore these bony contours were adjusted by means of resective osseous surgeries, and then you had seen that it is being closed back. So this particular area where initially there was a pocket present, and after the bone contouring is being done, the gingiva has fallen back, and this is made self-sensible for the patient. So coming on to the examination and treatment plan, careful probing is required. So what all do we do? First we take the probing depth, then we take the measurement from the pocket base to the mucogingival junction relationship and attachment level on the adjacent teeth. We also check for the furcation defects and the bony defects. Radiographs are being checked. Generally 2D dimension radiographs are taken, but sometimes it doesn't give a proper accuracy of osseous topography. So we can go in for transgingival probing, whereby we do two types of transgingival probing or bone sounding. This is horizontal bone sounding, where you go in from the horizontal aspect of your teeth, that is either from the buccal or the lingual side. You go and touch the bone to check out how much is the bone level and how is the bone morphology. This is vertical bone sounding, wherein you probe it from the sulcus to the depth of the bone after anesthetizing the patient to find how the intrabony contours are. So factors for case selection and technique selection. So generally location and type of the bony defects tells what type of treatment we go in for. So you generally recommend this for treatment bone defects less than 3 mm, when the root trunk length is sufficient, when there are no much tooth inclination, and also seeing the thickness of the facial housing and alveolar bone margin alteration. So these factors are to be taken into consideration when you're going to do this particular surgery. So these are the instruments which are used for surgery. You do have the bone rongeurs, and you do have a set of carbide round burrs. You do have a set of diamond burrs, and then the Schuleger, that is the father of resective osseous surgery. Under him, this file has been named, and the Sugarman files, the back action chisels, and the Oceanbach chisels. So these are the instruments used for resective osseous surgery. So the technique involves first about the soft tissue management, how are we going to do, and then we go to the hard tissue management. For the soft tissue management, we prefer the apically displaced flap, and for the hard tissue management, there are 4 steps: vertical grooving, radicular blending, flattening of the interproximal bone, and gradualizing the marginal bone. So we will go stepwise. What are they? To start with, vertical grooving. So this is a technique which is designed to reduce the thickness of the alveolar housing. So this is to provide relative prominence to the radical aspect. So you can see that once there is a bulbous contour like this, so we dig grooves with the help of a carbide burr or a diamond burr. This is most useful in thick bony margins, shallow craters, and other areas that require osteoplasty. It is contraindicated in area with thin alveolar housing or close root proximity. So vertical grooving is done on the sides of the bone, on the sides of the teeth, on the bone area, with the help of the carbide burrs. After this, you have the radicular blending. So this is just an extension of the first step. So it is an attempt to blend over the entire radicular surface to provide best results from grooving. So after you groove these areas, the bone which is there on the radicular surface is blended to the both the vertical groove areas. It is not required in cases where vertical grooving is minor, or whether the fenestration, whether the radicular bone is thin or fenestrated. The third one, flattening of the interproximal bone. So this requires a small removal of the supporting bone, basically an osteotomy procedure. It is indicated when the level of the interproximal bone varies horizontally, indicated in one wall defects or hemiseptal defects, or coronally placed one wall edge of a predominantly 3 wall defect. So here I do have small window peaks which are there. So I cut off these 2 bones. So basically that is my flattening of the interproximal bone. So here I can see certain irregular margins. Can you see this? So I am taking off this interproximal areas. The last and the final step is gradualizing the marginal bone. The bone removal is necessary to provide a sound regular base for the gingival tissue to follow. It is preferable to use hand instruments such as chisels and curettes rather than the rotary instrument for gradualizing the marginal bone. So here you can see that after the procedure is being done, I did have certain marginal bones like this. So that bones are removed away with the help of chisels. I am taking this off so that I am getting the normal contour where the interdental bone is up coronal to the radicular bone. So these small areas where the bones are left out are called the window peaks. That also can be removed with a chisel, and the flap is adapted back. So the diagrammatic representation of the area of the 4 procedures. So I start with the procedure, I have a bulbous contour here. I go in for vertical grooving, and this flat area is there. I try to blend it along with the grooves on both the sides. After that, I go in for flattening of the interproximal bone on both the sides, on the either sides, and then I go in for my last procedure, wherein I gradualize my marginal bone, taking away with the help of chisels, and then my final area. So this is a clinical picture wherein I have a bony defect, a bulbous contour here. I go in for vertical grooving. You can see the grooves which are put, and then the radicular blending is being done. And after that, the third procedure is not done in this case. The fourth procedure, wherein the marginal, gradualizing the marginal bone is done, it is being gradualized. So this is the fourth procedure. Specific conditions, reshaping conditions, like for example, you can do conditions in funnel shaped craters adjacent to edentulous areas, vertical bone loss, furcation involvement, exostosis, or ledges areas. So what are osseous craters? Osseous craters are the two-wall defects. These are the most common bony defects found in patients with periodontitis. Usually, you have facial interproximal bony contours after flap reflection. So try to create, note that there is loss of some interproximal bony craters on the sides. So you do have some amount of bone loss, bone occurring in this area also. So for these areas, just osteoplasty is required. Whereas when there is more amount of bone on either sides, you can go for ostectomy. So this is a correction of furcation involvement, where I have a bony contour here. I just do little bit of osseous recontouring. That way I can correct my furcation involvement. There is a one wall defect here, so I just take away this wall. So I ramp it. So this is called as ramping. I ramp it so that it becomes continuous. The bone becomes continuous, and there is no defect as such like this. So again, to give you a broad view, I have a defect of around 3 to 4 mm, and you can see the defect like this. The bony contours are irregular. I go in for procedures of osseous recontouring, and I make it adapted to the surface so that it is self-cleansable for the patient. And the post-operative view, this is on the palatal aspect, the same thing on the palatal aspect. Same condition, osseous recontouring done in the case of exostosis. So I can see bulbous contour here, so I just flatten it by means of osseous recontouring. So reduction of bulbous or bony defects can be done with the help of osseous recontouring. So these are examples of them. So amount of bone removed is always a concern. Aim is to remove the minimal amount of bone that will meet the end needs of an adequate architectural form. This depends on the depth of the intrabony defect, the position of the intrabony defect, mesiodistal width of the interproximal area, general anatomy of the area, relative position in the dental arch. So to conclude, the use of osseous surgery represents a balance between removing the existing tissues and maintaining the remaining tissues. The goal is to establish the contours that existed naturally, with the assumption that this will facilitate hygiene and long-term maintenance. If the contours are non-physiologic and the dimension of the epithelium and connective tissue are not of biologic width, then it allows for the potential for plaque accumulation and further pathology. For these reasons, we should have a judicious use of ostectomy combined with osteoplasty. Thank you.